countenance and give thee peace. The prayer song has primitive polyphony atypical for the Middle East. One hears frequently fourths and fifths in congregational singing. All religious ceremonies are led by the priests. The present head of the Samaritan community is Amram, the high priest. Amram, a descendant of the Levites, is both the religious and secular leader. He and the elders perform marriages, grant divorces, arbitrate all disagreements, and judge crimes, as they do not submit their disputes to outsiders. Samaritan children learn their ancient chants, hymns, and melodies by rote. They study only the 5 books of Moses and the Samaritan prayers. In pigmentation, they show more than the usual 25% millennial home of the Samaritans. Only in the last few years have girls been allowed to study with the boys. Land of olives, figs, and a Samaritan boy is considered an adult with natural when he undergoes the bountiful rain, which means confirmation, roughly equivalent to the Jewish bar mitzvah. Of Samaria's age-old history of grandeur and desolation are visible to recite by heart a generous portion of an ancient capital, which qualifies a boy for Sebastia. The Samaritan chanting of the Bible is the most archaic in existence, and its musical notation belongs to the earliest in history. A sarcophagus. Often children are betrothed by their families before they are born. The Samaritan wedding is a joyous communal event. Jacob's well. Traditionally, the Samaritans have wed exclusively over this hallowed site, and tradition holds that it is here that Jesus talked with the Samaritan woman. The Samaritans do not favor celibacy, yet in the past, many men remained unmarried because of scarcity of women. The village of Awarta, traditional burial site of the ancient priests of Israel. Men greet one another with great ceremony and heartily congratulate the bride, the high priest. The bride, however, is not present at the ceremony during which the priest reads the heart of Samaria is the valley city of Shechem, or Nablus, which lies between 2 mountains, Gerizim and Ebal. The Samaritans endured great suffering within the walls of this sunlit Arab town, once numerous, several hundred thousand in the 2nd century before the Common Era. They are today a tiny remnant of less than 450 souls. Mythical people, tall, graceful, majestic. Each Samaritan death is mourned by the entire community. Devoutly monotheistic. Traditionally, their dead were interred in unmarked graves to prevent desecration by enemies. Samaritan prayer is offered with upturned palms. Each worshiper passes his hand over his face from forehead to chin when he recites the Samaritan Creed. My faith is in thee, O Lord, and in Moses, son of Amram, thy servant, and in the holy law, and in Mount Gerizim, Samaritan communities exist, and in the day of vengeance and recompense, in Gaza, in Ramli, and in villages surrounding Mount Gerizim. Shem. At the today, Samaritans live only in Nablus and in Holon. The Samaritan quarter lies at the foot of Mount Gerizim on the outskirts of Nablus, and its center is the synagogue. The synagogue is a house of prayer and assembly. Prayers are both in Hebrew and in Samaritan, a Western Aramaic dialect. On entering the synagogue, the Samaritan prostrates himself, facing the Torah shrine and the sacred mountain of Gerizim. The Samaritans believe that they are the true Hebrews, guardians of the law. Jews, however, maintain that according to biblical sources, they were foreigners brought into Samaria in the 8th century before the Common Era to replace the native population deported to Assyria. Unlike the Jews, they accept only the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, and do not recognize the Psalms or the prophets as theirs, declaring that they will never add to the law of Moses or modify it. The synagogue also houses the holy treasures of the Samaritans, their ancient Torah scrolls, manuscripts, and ceremonial objects. The scrolls are handwritten on parchment. Dr. Zeev Ben-Haim, foremost expert on Samaritan grammar and literature, points to manuscripts written in Paleo-Hebrew, commonly known as Samaritan script. A table of alphabets showing the development of Paleo-Hebrew from simple ideograms, pictures of objects, to the Samaritan script still in use today. A fragment in early Samaritan. A book of wedding hymns from the 12th century. Arabic is often interpolated into the Samaritan script, at times even in a single line of the text. Ketubot, marriage contracts. They are zealously guarded by the Samaritans and never shown to strangers while the couple is alive. These date from the 14th century and are written on parchment. As distinct from Jewish custom, Samaritan scrolls are always opened at the portion of the Aaronic blessing. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance and give thee peace. The prayer song has primitive polyphony atypical for the Middle East. One hears frequently fourths and fifths in congregational singing. All religious ceremonies are led by the priests. The present head of the Samaritan community is Amram, the high priest. Amram, a descendant of the Levites, is both the religious and secular leader. He and the elders perform marriages, grant divorces, arbitrate all disagreements, and judge crimes, as they do not submit their disputes to outsiders. Samaritan children learn their ancient chants, hymns, and melodies by rote. They study only the 5 books of Moses and the Samaritan prayers. In pigmentation, they show more than the usual 25% of Mediterranean blondism. Only in the last few years have girls been allowed to study with the boys. A Samaritan boy is considered an adult when he undergoes the rite of chitmi, which means confirmation, roughly equivalent to the Jewish bar mitzvah. It is not his age, but rather his ability to recite by heart a generous portion of the Pentateuch, which qualifies a boy for chitmi. The Samaritan chanting of the Bible is the most archaic in existence, and its musical notation belongs to the earliest in history. Often children are betrothed by their families before they are born. The Samaritan wedding is a joyous communal event. Traditionally, the Samaritans have wed exclusively within their community. Thus, first cousin marriages are the rule and not the exception. The Samaritans do not favor celibacy, yet in the past, many men remained unmarried because of scarcity of women. Men greet one another with great ceremony and heartily congratulate the bridegroom. The bride, however, is not present at the ceremony during which the priest reads the marriage contract. The Samaritans endured great suffering and persecution through the years. Once numerous, several 100,000 in the 2nd century before the Common Era, they are today a tiny remnant of less than 450 souls. Each Samaritan death is mourned by the entire community. Traditionally, their dead were interred in unmarked graves to prevent desecration by enemies. Samaritan prayer is offered with upturned palms. Each worshiper passes his hand over his face from forehead to chin when he recites the Samaritan Creed. My faith is in thee, O Lord, and in Moses, son of Amram, thy servant, and in the holy law, and in Mount Gerizim, Bethel, and in the day of vengeance and recompense. Nablus Shem, at the foot of Mount Gerizim, was always the center of the Samaritan community. Ancient Shem main city of the Samaritans, which is uninhabited today, existed even before the time of Abraham. This town was enclosed by a great defense wall, built of massive stones which the inhabitants called cyclopean. They believed that only a giant could have set them in place. Archaeologists have uncovered only half the wall's height. One of the men interested in unraveling the riddle of the Samaritans is Dr. Robert Bull, who has been digging in Shem for years.
We are within the ancient city of Shechem, a city which has known repeated destruction and rebuilding from the time of Abraham to the time of its final destruction under John Hyrcanus in the 2nd century BC. There is to be found here a great defense wall, of which this is the east gate. But at one stage, as we can see, there were steps from the inside leading up to this gate, because the gate was not through the wall, rather it was on top of the wall. And one walked up steps through the gate and then down a ramp on the outside. The fact that it's a double gate is primarily a defense mechanism. If attackers came through the outer gate, they could be stopped at the inner gate in a confined area. We happen to know that in the majority of the destructions of the city was attacked through this gate. This is the weakest point of the city.
The forecourt of a Canaanite temple in the center of ancient Shem. It was built about 1650 before the Common Era. Within the temple, standing stones were found. Matzevot, one of them, has been restored to its socket. Also found within the temple, the oldest fluted column known, dating from the 14th century before the Common Era. In front of the temple, archaeologists discovered the remains of a Hellenistic building, most probably the home of a Samaritan living in his city at the foot of his sacred mountain, Gerizim. All Samaritan life revolves around the sacred mountain, Gerizim. It is the mountain of blessing, while across from it, Ebal is the mountain of curses. Samaritans believe that Gerizim, and not Jerusalem, was the site of the biblical tabernacle. They maintain that all major events of biblical history took place here. On this mountain, in the Garden of Eden, Adam was fashioned from clay. Here Abraham bound Isaac. And here in Messianic times, this mountain will once again be paradise. The Samaritan chronicles often mention a city on Mount Gerizim, and indeed on the mountain's southwest slope, archaeologists have discovered heaps of stones which upon closer examination turned out to be the remains of walls. They also found pottery which dates from the 3rd and 2nd century before the Common Era. Based on this evidence, archaeologists think that this may have been the Samaritan city which existed in the Hellenistic period at the height of Samaritan prosperity. It was probably destroyed by John Hyrcanus at the time he destroyed Shem and the Samaritan temple. Here is a Samaritan oil lamp found in Caesarea. The inscription on it reads, "There is no God like Yeshurun." A Samaritan stone inscription of the 10 Commandments found in Kfar Bilu. On Gerizim's northernmost peak, Tel El-Ras, an important excavation is taking place. It was found to contain a 2nd century Common Era temple of Zeus, built by Hadrian, cisterns added in the next century, and the remains of a 6th century church. Dr. Bull believes that Tel El-Ras is the site of the Samaritan temple because underneath these ruins he discovered a massive structure of unhewn stones. And since the Samaritan commandment states, "If thou buildest thine altar of earth, thou doest well. But if thou buildest thine altar of stone, lay not thy chisel upon it." He believes it to be a Samaritan temple. The Samaritans, however, disagree. They insist that the site of their temple was on the highest peak of the mountain. So far, however, only a church from the 6th century Common Era has been found there. From ancient times, they have been rising long before dawn to ascend Mount Gerizim on the 3 annual pilgrimages: Passover, Pentecost, and Feast of Booths. Only the men, bearing their staffs like the patriarchs of old, make their way through the chill of the night up the mountain. The procession halts at each holy place. First, by the 12 stones of Joshua, brought from the river Jordan to commemorate the crossing into the Promised Land. Next, at the site of the Holy Tabernacle. Then, at the sacrificial altar of Abraham, where they bend down to kiss the rock. And finally, at the holiest spot of all, the temple rock, into which the ancient tabernacle with all its sacred vessels disappeared when God's grace withdrew. The Samaritans believe Gerizim to be the highest mountain in the world. No Samaritan blessing is valid without the name of Gerizim. Originally, the Feast of Booths was an agricultural holiday. The 4 symbols used in Sukkah, or booth, are the date palm, the citrus fruit, the willow, and the myrtle. Women and children string fruits and vegetables, which are then arranged in beautiful patterns. A vestige of the Samaritans' fear of the enemy is seen in the custom of building the sukkah inside their house. The men eat and sleep in the sukkah for 7 days, during which they are not allowed to touch women. Only on the most important occasions is the scroll of Abishua taken out. Samaritans hold that it was written by the great-grandson of Aaron, the high priest, brother of Moses, and is almost 3,500 years old. However, the scroll is too sacred to be subjected to an adequate scientific dating process. The worshippers are only permitted to kiss its glass case, from which it is never removed. In the 8th century, a Muslim ruler demanded distinguishing dress for unbelievers. Thus, even today, the color of the Samaritan headgear is red. Priests wear white turbans and white robes on high holidays and pilgrimages. The 3 eldest wear green robes. Traditionally, women were barred from all ceremonial and ritual functions. However, this is gradually changing. Spring. Samaria's earth stirs with life and renewal. The Samaritans celebrate their most important festival, Passover. On the day before the Passover, every family bakes matzah to recall the unleavened bread which the children of Israel ate during their flight from bondage to freedom. Matzah is made of flour and water, which is quickly kneaded. The Samaritans consider the ritual a sacred duty. The unique feature of the Samaritan Passover is the sacrifice, which has been retained and is carried out according to strict biblical rules. The slaughter of lambs commemorates the sacrifice which spared the firstborn of the Hebrew slaves the plague that struck their Egyptian taskmasters. Unblemished lambs are selected for the ritual. Take a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover. Usually the sacrifice is made at night to recall the plague of darkness. But when the holiday falls on the Sabbath, it takes place on Friday, 6 hours before sunset. It is performed over an altar trench lined with uncut stones. Early in the morning, wood is gathered for the ovens, which are deep circular pits dug in the ground. Brush is also brought for the boiling of the water. For many years, this archaic rite has attracted many spectators. The procession arrives, led by the high priest. Today, the Samaritans live in 2 cities, in Nablus and in Holon, a new settlement near Tel Aviv. Outwardly, the Samaritans of Nablus are Arabicized, the Samaritans of Holon westernized. Yet the entire community meets in Nablus for all important communal events and all religious festivals. The priests spread their prayer rugs on the ground and start the chanting. Throughout the ceremony, they repeat the Samaritan Creed and recount the story of creation, of the Exodus, and of the patriarchs. At last, the long-awaited moment arrives. The Shohatim, ritual slaughterers, perform the sacrificial act. The Samaritans exult. Every male forehead is dotted with sacrificial blood, signifying escape from the plague of the firstborn. Scalding water is used to facilitate the removal of the wool and cleaning of the lambs. A ritual inspection is made. No organ must be damaged, no bone must be broken. A special burnt offering is placed on the trench. Designated portions are reserved for the priests. The lambs are spitted. Salting is done by cutting deep into the skin. Before the Samaritans lower the sacrifice into ovens, they cry out, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." The ovens are sealed with wet earth, extinguishing the fires. The intense heat will suffice to roast the lambs. Several hours later, the sacrifice is removed. The roasted meat is placed in large pans with matzah and bitter herbs. These herbs grow on the holy mountain. They symbolize the bitterness of life under Egyptian tyranny. To symbolize the hasty departure from Egypt, the meat is eaten very quickly. At the turn of the century, the Samaritans were close to extinction. They numbered only 135 souls. Today, the community has increased to 430. The Samaritans have survived persecution, conversion, wars, and plagues. For thousands of years, they have held stubbornly to their beliefs. Their monotheistic religion made them, under Muslim law, a people of the book, which entitled them to special treatment as a separate religio-ethnic entity, regardless of political or territorial changes. Whatever the future has in store for them, they wish to develop in their own way and at their own pace, true to themselves and to their collective destiny. Their 14th century poet, Abisha ben Pinhas, wrote, "Mount Gerizim is sacred, and there is no mountain like it. The Messiah will rejoice and declare with all his heart and soul, 'Blessed be this people and its seed. There is no nation like it. In the end of time, all nations will become Samaritan.'"